Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm delighted to host our conversation this evening with Walter Isaacson. But first, an overview of tonight's program. We'll begin with remarks by Mr. Isaacson, followed by my conversation with him about his most recent book, The Innovators. So now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our featured guest. Walter Isaacson is president and CEO of the Aspen Institute, which is a nonpartisan educational and policy studies organization based in Washington, D.C. He's worked as a political correspondent, national editor, editor of new media, before becoming Time magazine's 14th editor in 1996. He became chairman and CEO of CNN, and then president of CEO of the Aspen Institute in 2003. He's the author of Steve Jobs, Einstein, His Life and Universe, Benjamin Franklin, An American Life, Kissinger, A Biography, and he's also the co-author of The Wise Men, Six Friends, and the World They Made. Mr. Isaacson is Chair Emeritus of Teach for America, which recruits recent college graduates to teach in underserved communities, and he was appointed by President Barack Obama to serve as the chairman of the Broadcasting Board of Governors, which oversees Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and other international broadcasts of the United States. Mr. Isaacson's most recent book, The Innovators, How a Group of Inventors, Hackers, Geniuses, and Geeks Created the Digital Revolution, is a biological tale of people who invented the computer, the microprocessor, the internet, and some of the greatest innovations of our time. He's a graduate of Harvard College. He's a Rhodes Scholar and a board director of some of America's most distinguished institutions, including Harvard, United Airlines, and Tulane University in his native New Orleans. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of the world's most extraordinary chroniclers of innovation, Walter Isaacson.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Salim, for having me. Thank you very much, Earl, for that kind introduction. It's great to be here, especially at an urban innovation center. One of the things that surprises me as I travel around over the past 10 years is the growth of these urban innovation centers. Obviously, this is both the largest and most exciting that I've seen. But we thought that the digital revolution would allow us all to sort of telecommute, Skype, do Google Hangouts. But what we didn't realize is that creative people do like to gather together. They do like to rub elbows. They do like to meet in the flesh. That's why Marissa Mayer, when she took over Yahoo, she said, hey, quit telecommuting in, show up at the office. Real creativity happens in person. It's also why Steve Jobs, when he built the Pixar headquarters and designed the new Apple headquarters in Cupertino, just made this big old atrium where you have to go through it, bump into people, whether you're going to the bathroom, the screening room, or get something to eat. Because he said when people meet face to face, the sparks fly, ideas happen. And I especially like to see it here in beautiful Toronto, how that innovation is happening in a real space. My hometown in New Orleans, we're trying to build a few things like this, and I will go back to New Orleans next week with a whole lot of ideas in my head. Innovation is an interesting word for a center like this. It's a word that's been used a lot. It's sort of become a buzzword, and I think it's been drained of some of its meaning because we use it so much. So one reason I did this book was to actually look at real innovators, real people who actually had made an advance and made a leap. People say, what's the secrets of innovation? And I say, well, you know, if you want one of those, you can buy one of those little books that says 7 Secrets to Innovation. But really, those of us, it's lucky for those of us who write books and biographies and biographical narratives, because there is no one way to do innovation. You have to look into yourself, say, what talents do I have? What are my creative talents? Is it building teams? Is it working with people? Is it having vision? Is it being an executive, an engineer, or what? And then form a team around you, because that is the main theme of the book, is that creativity is a collaborative process. Innovation's a team sport. And that's true, I found out, even in doing Steve Jobs. I once asked Steve Jobs a few years ago, when he was very sick, I said, what product are you most proud of? I thought maybe you would say the iPod or the iPhone or maybe the original Mac. And he said, no, those products were hard, but what was really hard was creating a team, pulling together a group of people who could collaborate. The best product I ever made was Apple, both in the early 80s when he did the original Mac team with the pirate flag hanging over the Bandar building, or when he did the team he left at Apple. He was a visionary. He was pretty strong and tough to work with. People said, how could he be so mean? How could he be so tough to work with? You have to look at the results. People said he was hard to work with, but I wouldn't have given it up for anything in the world. In fact, all the way through his career, he has the most loyal and dedicated teams of people working with him. So in starting to write about innovators, one of the things I discovered is they do tend to come in teams and come in pairs. I began with Ada Lovelace. Seems like an odd place to begin, the 1830s. The real computer revolution doesn't begin until 100 years later. But Ada Lovelace was Lord Byron's daughter. And what I did is I tried to find just real people, and I'm going to just pick a few of them and then we'll get into our conversation, but real people who excited me. So Ada Byron, the Countess of Lovelace. Her father, of course, is a great romantic poet. If you know anything about Lord Byron, it will not surprise you to learn that by the time Ada was growing up, Lady Byron was not that fond of Lord Byron. In fact, he was too much of a romantic poet. And she decided to make sure that Ada would not succumb to that fate by having Ada tutored mainly in mathematics, as if mathematics were some antidote to being romantic or a poet. It didn't quite work. Ada ended up loving math and loving poetry. She called it poetical science, and she's able to do what all great innovators do, which is connect the arts to the sciences. To go back to Steve Jobs once again, any of you have seen on YouTube any of his product launches, the big slide on the screen at the very end is the intersection of two streets, the arts and the sciences. He says that's where the true creativity happens. And that was true of Ada Lovelace. She traveled around the English Midlands looking at the looms, the mechanical looms, weaving machines that were using punch cards to do these beautiful tapestries. Her father was a Luddite, and I mean that literally. Lord Byron's only speech in the House of Lords was defending Ned Ludd and his followers who were smashing these looms because they thought technology put people out of work. Wrong. Ada got the beauty of it. She said, oh, those punch cards can do beautiful tapestries. She had a friend named Charles Babbage. They were the team there. That friend, Charles Babbage, is making a numerical calculator. And Ada says, if you use the punch cards he's thinking of using, it can do more than just numbers. It can do patterns. It can do art. It can do music. It can do anything that can be noted in symbols, words, anything. In other words, she envisions the computer as opposed to just the calculator. She even writes an algorithm and publishes it, back when women didn't generally publish scientific papers, in a scientific journal, describing the analytical engine, but even laying out how you would instruct it to do something, a particular task. So she really is the first published software programmer and really a pioneer in software programming. You leap forward 100 years, and you get to somebody else who's interesting. You'll hear more about him soon because the movie's coming out in a couple of weeks called The Imitation Game, but it's Alan Turing. And he read and based a lot of what he did on Ada Lovelace. But there was one thing about Ada Lovelace that he disagreed with, because Ada said a machine will be able to do everything. And then she adds her caveat, except think. The machines will not be imaginative. They won't be creative. That's where you have to connect humans to machine and connect them as closely as possible. Turing says that's Lady Lovelace's objection, he called it. And he says, how do we know that? How would we test that? And he comes up with what is called the imitation game. We now call it the Turing test. You put a machine and a person in a room, you send in questions, and after a while you cannot tell which one's a machine and which one's a human. He says there's no reason to say the machine isn't thinking. The beginning of artificial intelligence research under Turing. Now, my book, I kept waiting for artificial intelligence to happen, but it doesn't. Year after year, people say it's 20 years away. And now you'll have people on the stage who'll come here and say it's 20 years away. But we don't actually get that much closer to artificial intelligence. What we do get closer to and see in leaps and bounds is innovation that comes from the intimate connection of humans to machines. You know, next time I'm here, I'll be wearing an Apple Watch, wearing Google Glass, having the iPhone as well as my BlackBerry in the pocket. And yes, I am still a BlackBerry person, even though I have an iPhone and a BlackBerry because I'm really geeky and can't make up my mind. Because of this, our machines are becoming more attached to us and more intimate. And that sort of refutes, in a way, Alan Turing's belief that we would not be able to tell machines from humans. Alan Turing, as you probably know, is homosexual, not totally open about it, but not ashamed of it. But being in British intelligence, breaking the German wartime codes in World War II, and then afterwards, it was not a hospitable time for that to happen. So he got arrested for his homosexuality. And he is sentenced to take hormone treatments, as if he's a machine, as if you can reprogram him by giving him hormone treatments. He does it for a while, seems to take it in stride, but then, tragically, he takes an apple, dips it in cyanide, bites into the apple, and kills himself. Is that something a machine would do? I don't think so. And in some ways, Alan Turing's own life is a living refutation, in a way, of the difference between humanity and the complexity of it and machines that are totally pre-programmed. Anyway, throughout the digital age, you see this notion of trying to make our machines more personal and more intimate with us. One of the other heroes in the book is a guy named J.C.R. Licklider. Hardly ever heard of him. But he developed the air defense system. He was at MIT. And he realized that if you have an air defense system, you really have to have easy, interactive computers. You can't do, none of you are old enough to remember, but I am. You are, because you were there with me in college, carrying batch processing punch cards we coded in Fortran. And you'd bring them to the computer as if you were bringing an offering to an oracle, and there'd be priests around the damn computer, and they would take your punch cards, and if you dropped them, you were toast or whatever. He said, no, it has to be interactive, fast, intimate, right? Partnership, symbiosis with humans. He does that. He also makes graphical user interfaces because you got to be able to see the missiles coming in the plane, see which one's moving, how fast they're going, all very graphically. And he even says we have to network all these things, and he jokingly calls it the Intergalactic Computer Network. But when he gets to the Pentagon, he funds it. It becomes ARPANET, then the Internet.